I looked at the countries in the world that have really been able to leverage on their creativity. Countries such as South Korea that have leveraged on it and completely monetized it and even used it to sort of reposition their narrative in the global community. So we used BCG to do a deep dive of some of these countries, what they have done, and then we brought it to Nigeria, looked at our numbers, looked at our potential, and localized it. So we started putting up a structure. And it was important for me to take time to put up a structure because Mr. President wants us to have something long-term, something that is sustainable. So you look at something like IP, the fact that there was no robust IP policy in place to protect the people within the community and also to encourage investment. So we started with the IP policy. We have completed that project, IP policy. It will be going to the Federal Executive Council, and hopefully, you know, we will deliver IP to the industry. And then also, I looked at the issue of funding. One of the main areas that you find that really prohibits people in the industry from growing is the fact that they have no access to funding. So we went about looking for international funding to see how we can support the industry.
That's right.
I'm very happy to announce, I mean, yesterday we did announce it, that we are about to implement $200 million of funding, injecting it directly into the industry. We are partnering with a Frexim Bank that did initially commit $200 million to us for the industry. And we've worked together to put up a framework to ensure that this funding is able to go directly to the industry. And I announced it yesterday and I will announce it again today. We are literally going to implement this $200 funding that would go directly to the industry. And my hope is that it would go to the people who need it across the nation.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Right.
I'm going to be very intentional in ensuring that creatives all over the country, rural, urban, have access to this funding. So we have the funding.
Now,
I want to...
sorry to pause. That makes a whole lot of sense. You know, it's one thing for you to have an idea, and then another thing for you to have all the strategies in place to birth this idea to the benefit of the entire people of Nigeria. But according to recent reports, they indicated that Nigerian government aims to elevate the creative industry's contribution to national GDP to as much as $100 billion by 2030. So I'm wondering what kind of reforms, you've mentioned some, what kind of strategies you're not bringing on board to, you know, not just attract funding, but also contribute to the national GDP growth.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was as a result of that deep dive that we did, looking at these benchmark countries, that we were able to project that Nigeria was able to contribute that $100 billion. We committed to this, and I believe that we can do that and more by closing some of these lacunas that I spoke about, for example, IP, which is completely foundational, and the fact that it wasn't there. You know, this is one area that you can do it. Then you also look at the issue of infrastructure.
For better understanding of our audience, what exactly is IP?
IP means intellectual property. I'm sorry. I've been reading so much about IP. Intellectual property, you know, what we're even doing, we're even going beyond that. Now we're monetizing that IP. We have come up with a framework where, as a creative, you can now use your IP as collateral to access funding. And this is, again, something that we're working with a Frexim Bank with an additional commitment that they've given us to ensure that creatives can now use their creativity, and that IP that will be protected from the IP, from the intellectual property policy, to collateralize and use that as collateral for them to get the funding. So that is one lacuna that you're closing. And then the issue, like I said, of the funding is one, because when you talk about the value, but there's no value if creators in the industry have no ability to create. When they create, the communities are able to give value to their communities.
Absolutely.
Some of the value that is being lost, we're also looking at how we can bring that value back home. some of the policies that we're also talking about, in addition to the intellectual property policy, is also the cultural policy, which has been seated and has been outdated since 2017. So we have brought out that cultural policy because that really is sort of the constitution, so to speak, of the cultural sector. So we have taken the culture. Go ahead, please.